to another episode of Alf Today we're going to talk about workload automation. Quite an interesting topic, I would say, and Joe Goldberg, a good friend, will join us and explain why everybody should be interested in workload automation and why it's pretty much the future of modern IT. Welcome to the zoo, Joe.
Hello, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Where are you from? Where are you right now? You're across the border, aren't you?
Yes, I'm actually in Toronto, Canada.
Excellent.
And it's almost summer here, but not quite. Winter just doesn't want to give up and go away.
So there are still polar bears on the street, and yes, I get it.
Well, sure. That's the way it is in Canada, always.
You've been in the industry for quite a while, and at a recent meeting that we had, you gave a wonderful pitch about workload automation in general, and I was quite mesmerized by how many companies are using it and how important it is to our average life, because I took it as something that, yeah, a few large process-driven guys use, but it's nothing that really concerns me, maybe in the oil industry or whatever. But when I heard your story, it sounded it was every day, to some degree, I'm touched by it.
Well, yes, that's absolutely the case. You know, there's always this discussion, especially nowadays, about the back office and the front office and what makes up IT and what really drives businesses and organizations. And workload automation, which used to be called job scheduling, some people call it still batch, it's really the heart of the business, and it keeps businesses running, and it's been doing it for such a long time that people kind of forgotten how important it is. But really, every single business that, as soon as you have an IT department that might be bigger than 1 or 2 servers, you're probably either already using workload automation, or if you're not, you need it.
And so what's a simple use case, a real-life use case that we see out there?
Well, you know, from a consumer perspective, what we see, so some of the examples that we use frequently, you know, Carfax is a company, and actually their name is kind of interesting because the fax in Carfax comes from the fact that the business started in somebody's garage and they used to fax information around using a fax machine. Mm-hmm. But you know, nowadays they do vehicle reports, and if you're buying a used car, pretty much it's become standard practice to either ask for, and for reputable dealers to give you, a vehicle history. And it gives you all the information about any accidents the car's been in, any work it's had done, so that when you're buying the product, you know whether you're buying something that you can rely on or not. Well, Carfax uses Control-M, and the way they develop their vehicle reports is by aggregating data from pretty much every source that provides any information about used vehicles. So insurance companies, motor vehicle bureaus, repair facilities, and of course all of this information is connected by the vehicle identification number, or the VIN. And so they munch all this data, produce a vehicle report, and that's what you get. And I'm not sure whether they still do, but for a long time, and I think they still do, guarantee the accuracy of that report. So much so that if you buy a vehicle and there's something wrong with the report, and you know this contributed to your decision to buy the car, and now you're unhappy with the fact that you discovered it might have been in an accident when it wasn't, or it was painted when you didn't realize, whatever, they'll repurchase the car from you. Yeah. So, you know, that's obviously something that touches anybody who buys or deals with used cars. But there's examples in every single industry, because very little happens, again, in any company of any size that uses computers without workload automation. So, you know, whether you're doing payroll or inventory or supply chain management, payables, bank deposits, literally every major business system is either completely or at least partially implemented using workload automation.
So, and I have to apologize. I think we have a little bit of camera issue. Okay, here we go. There we go, back. Now, because you disappeared for a few minutes there, but that's okay. The story was perfect. Anywho, what and also heard that in the travel industry, every time I book a plane, although it's on one of these cute websites, at the end of the day, it goes through one of the major pipes, and Amadeus in one of those systems, and they too use workload automation. So pretty much every time I try to step on a plane, somehow these workload-driven processes are behind the curtain.
Well, yeah. I mean, in the case, Amadeus happens to use Control M, so we obviously use them as an example, but every operator of a reservation system is using some version or flavor of workload automation. The thing that is, yeah, especially after 9/11, that's particularly interesting. Nowadays, any plane that has to land in the U.S., the passenger manifest has to be sent to Homeland Security or TSA before the plane can leave the ground. And so if there's any problem with the workload automation solution in one of these providers or in Amadeus, planes don't leave the ground. So hopefully this hasn't happened too often, but sometimes if you're sitting on the ground somewhere in a plane, somewhere in Europe or other part of the world, waiting to take off to go to the U.S.,
they don't
may be.
No, then it's probably someone else's fault. However, if you leave on time, then thank you very much.
Absolutely, absolutely. The point is that, you know, sometimes it's because the passenger list has been sent successfully and on time, and the TSA has found the problem. I don't know if you've ever been. I actually had the experience of being on a plane once, and somebody, the plane was almost ready to leave, and eventually they had to take somebody off. They never explained why, but I suspect it might have been because this person was either some questionable character or what. I don't know. But the way that happened.
You're talking about when they took me off when we came out from Vegas last year. No, let them know that.
No. What happens in Vegas, you know, definitely stays in Vegas. So that's not an issue.
No, and so that's we're talking about close to real-time information, or no, maybe not real-time, but a fairly quick turnaround and large amount of data, and with huge amount of accuracy involved. So it's quite thrilling. And let me ask you this: so you talked about large corporations and large organizations. What about the little guy? Is this for everyone? Should you? I mean, if I have a mid-sized corporation, what do I use it for? HR? Is that it, or where does workload get there?
Really, every business system, one way or another, and it's actually interesting that as volume grows, you know, we think today of being in a real-time, you know, Uber-connected, appified world. Well, all of those things are really front ends to back-end IT systems. You know, you go to Amazon, you buy a book, or any website or any web store, and you make a purchase. The vast majority of that, the fulfillment process and getting that product to your door is done by workload automation. The real-time stuff, you know, and I don't know if you had this experience with Amazon, but certainly with even booking tickets and so forth, or buying anything, you get a confirmation saying your order has been received, but it's only a little bit later that you get an email saying that it's actually confirmed or that your product has been shipped. What has happened, meanwhile, is that, you know, inventory was checked, the product was maybe picked either manually in smaller organizations or by some automated picking machine, put into a box, you know, sent to UPS or FedEx or whatever. They themselves are using workload automation as well, and so, you know, the whole process is that way. Now, if you're a smaller organization, you still have business systems, and the complexity that exists today, you know, I'm going to drop a little bit into some technical discussion here, but anybody who has a computer and has any experience with a computer, you probably know, you know, you may be running, let's say, a Windows server, and on that server you have a database, and you may have some files that you move around. You may be doing that with 2, 3, 4 different tools. And if you have any kind of either time dependency or any kind of sequencing requirements, meaning that, you know, you have to transfer the file before you can, I don't know, drop it into a spreadsheet, you may need workload automation to make sure that the sequencing of that is correct and that the file that you really intended to process is what you're processing. So, you know, it really is an IT discipline that is core to any kind of computer operating, you know, getting value out of computers today.
And so, well, having myself sat through maybe 3,000 or 4,000 of leads, and to have to use spreadsheet to somehow sort and make sense of it, I could have done with a bit of workload automation myself. So what's next? Is this coming? Is workload automation in the cloud today? Is it all on? How does that work? And what do we see next?
Yes, workload automation is already in the cloud, and it's in the cloud in a couple of different flavors. I looking at cloud technology from a workload perspective, to me, cloud is just infrastructure. The fact that it's easier, faster, cheaper, whatever.
Don't tell anyone that. You can't sell these.
So I'm looking at it as a consumer, really, and from a workload automation perspective, we're looking at it as a consumer. And so it's very much infrastructure, whatever the infrastructure happens to be.
Yeah.
And today the necessity is to be kind of not to have to care about whether the infrastructure is real or virtual or cloud, and so that's already a requirement in workload today. Mm-hmm. I think what's coming down the road, though, is the continuing. We've been talking about connecting the front office to the back office for a long time. Mm-hmm. But like what I said before, when you have nice, friendly front ends and apps, really what they're doing is making it easier to consume those kind of back room, back office capabilities. Mm-hmm. And we've seen, the examples that we talked about in terms of where is workload automation and how prevalent it is in the business world. More and more people need to be able to get at it, to use it, to interact with it. Mm-hmm. And so just like we talk about consumerization of IT in any other discipline, that's also true with workload automation. And so what we're seeing and seeing rather considerably more demand for is making it easier, making it simpler. I think anybody who heard you mention workload automation, unless you're working in a discipline, they probably either groan or think, that's some arcane discipline that nobody cares about. Yeah. But the fact is that, if you're a payroll person or a finance person or whatever, a million other applications, and you need to get that information, you may not have known up until recently that you were dealing with workload, but now it's more of a factor in your life. You need to get that information. You need to be able to interact with it, and you want to do it in a way that's easy and friendly and simple. And so self-service and mobility are just as critical for accessing or interacting with workload services as with any other IT services. So that, I think, is the future. We've already started seeing it. Certainly from our own product line, from the Control M perspective, we do have already a self-service capability that is both web-based and available from smart devices. We've begun to expose just a little bit of that functionality, but organizations have shown a huge appetite for being able to consume that in a simple, straightforward way because, I think like with IT in general, they want those services. They just don't want to have to become workload automation experts to be able to get to it. And so that really is the focus of, I think, what will be the work for the next little while is exposing and consumerizing what are complex systems, including workload, in a way that can be consumed by the average business user or anybody who needs it without having to actually learn the details and complexities of that discipline.
Yeah, and absolutely, as big data becomes more important in our lives, and spilling out of our ears technically, we need to manage that, and we need to process that and turn it from data into knowledge. And I can see workload automation play a larger role in that evolution as well.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned big data because that's probably the latest buzz and trend and shiny new thing in IT. But big data is almost a completely batch environment or workload automation environment, meaning that the time frame for processing big data is not nanoseconds or microseconds. It's usually minutes or days, sometimes even, because the volume is so huge. The processing challenges are enormous in terms of how much resource it takes to actually make some useful or extract useful information out of it, and it's all done in batch. In other words, I would say really today, and I guess going forward, perhaps this is another thing to add, that the distinction between what is batch or background or workload as opposed to interactive real-time systems is whether they are connected to a human being waiting for a response on the other end or not. And as long as a person is not sitting there waiting for a response within a second or a couple of seconds, usually you can say that those kind of systems are really, either workload automation or batch-oriented systems. And we're seeing more and more of that. And again, because of the huge increase in web and real interactive connected traffic, the need to be able to kind of defer some of that processing is actually increasing. And this is actually driving an increase in workload automation, because that's what it does. So the stuff that that computers need to do when you're not sitting and waiting. So the example I gave earlier of a reservation, you click and make a reservation or buy something, you get confirmation saying, okay, we got your order, but then all of the other stuff that happens sort of behind the scenes now can be done at a slightly more leisurely pace. Not much, but slower, because the person isn't actually sitting there and waiting, and all of that is being done by workload. And that actually, that's the cycle that I mentioned, that because of that increase in the need for workload and the criticality of it, and the fact that it's really driving what are real-time online connected systems, people need to understand from a business perspective what's going on with workload more than they used to in the past even. And of course now they want to be able to do that in a easier, simpler, self-service manner, and so that's kind of driving that entire cycle of kind of bringing workload back into and making it sort of part of all of the consumerization, real-time, simplification, self-service trends that we're seeing in the industry.
I have to say, just spending such a short time with you, my impression of workload has obviously changed dramatically, and now I want to learn more. Do you have a Twitter account? You blog from time to time. Where can people learn more about this from you?
Well, certainly there's a variety of ways. I do have a Twitter account. I still use email, and I respond to it. My email is joe_goldberg@bmc.com. I'm always happy to answer questions. And, of course, bmc.com, BMC as a company has sort of three major areas that we focus on, and one of them is automation, which is including workload automation. If you go to bmc.com, you're going to see that featured prominently on the home page, but you can always go to bmc.com/control-M. We are very active in a variety of social channels. There's a communities page on bmc.com. There's a variety of LinkedIn groups. There's a Yahoo discussion list. There are physical groups. So
Yahoo. Now you start to be boring again. What? No, I'm kidding. That's fine. So
hey, Yahoo's the new Google, man. They're investing billions of dollars to make themselves relevant again.
No, it's quite amazing how aggressively they try to turn that thing around. We'll see how it goes, and good luck to them actually. Well, thank you, Joe. I really appreciate your time, and
my pleasure.
Have you here some other time. To the rest of you, be safe. Until then, bye-bye.